Hi, and welcome to my 9/11 stories. So this week, I thought I would talk a little bit about the money. Everybody's curious, I'm sure. So I did come into the insurance money, which was kind of ironic because Arron had initially failed the blood test that he was supposed to take in order to qualify for this life insurance that we got. And it turned out that the night before the nurse was supposed to come and do the blood test, he went out to a bar and he smoked a cigarette. So the blood test came back positive for a smoker, in which case he didn't qualify. So I had been bugging him and bugging him and bugging him to retake the test. And about 6 months before 9/11, he finally did. So bizarrely, he wound up being covered when he died. So with that payout came a financial advisor, and I had her services for a little while, and she kind of helped to educate me as to what was going to happen and what to do with this money, and explained about investments and yada yada. And it was pretty overwhelming at the time because I'm trying to learn all of this while raising two kids and grieving, and it just seemed so overwhelming at the time. But I eventually kind of realized that this was pretty important. So I eventually was told by actually another 9/11 widow about a woman who was a financial advisor. And so I went to visit her, and I met Deborah, and she was very competent and kind of put my mind at rest. When you get a big chunk of money, I kept saying to her, is this enough? Like, it seems like a big chunk of money, but it has to last the rest of my life, and I have no idea. Like, is this going to be enough? And when I kind of put it in those terms, although it seemed like a big chunk of money, it didn't seem like very much at all. And that was really scary. So I was still kind of trying to figure out how I was going to pay the mortgage. And a couple of months after 9/11, I went back to work, partly because I was driven by that fear, and I didn't know what was going to happen. So I felt a little more comfortable having this sum of money from the insurance. But then, of course, we were all hearing about the Victim Compensation Fund. So essentially what that was a big fund of money the government put together. And if we essentially signed away our right to sue the airlines, that we would then qualify for a chunk of money that would come out of this fund. So it got really complicated. There were tables and, trying to figure out like how much money they earned, how old they were, how many dependents they had. There was like these really, I think they tried to simplify it, but to me it seemed kind of complicated in ways of trying to figure out how much you were going to get. And when I did that, I figured it out, but between Deborah and a lawyer I had who was doing some work for me pro bono as a result of this, they felt that maybe I would be able to qualify for a little more. I don't know why. So I had to put together this huge dossier of, Arron and what he did around the house. And, it was just like this huge binder of things. And it was all, the lawyer was all very, systematic about it, as lawyers are wont to be, I guess. And so we kind of presented our case, and we had to go in and sort of present our case in front of I kept calling him Grandmaster Flash, but Grandmaster 9/11, I can't remember what his name was. Anyhow, there was a whole team of people, so we sort of had to present our case, which we did. And in the end, I got exactly the amount that I had calculated, a year before, with the very simple table that they had. So again, I had this surreal moment of receiving. We were visiting Seattle at the time, and so I had these 4 checks, FedEx to me, like gigantic amounts. Opening these checks, going, "Oh my God, what do I do with this?" So once those checks came in, and we kind of had a plan as to how we were going to invest things, and not putting all your eggs in one basket. So we had various ways of investing and whatnot. And so after that, and this is now, gosh, that would be about 3 to 4 years after 9/11. So quite a lot of time has gone by the time this all gets sorted out. So in this time I've worked, and then I've been living off of some of the, the interest from the, can't speak, some of the interest from the life insurance policy. And I'm trying to just be super frugal and all that. So anyway, the money has been very weird because it felt like blood money. It felt like I wouldn't get this money unless Arron had died. And that just felt super wrong. And in the early days, I actually donated a lot of money. Like, I think I just felt like I didn't deserve it somehow, and that other people needed it, and I don't know. So I had this initial, I went through all these different stages of having this money. And so I was giving to a lot of charities, that kind of thing. I don't know if that was sort of to appease my guilt, or what was going on, or if it just felt like so much money that I just didn't need this much money. But in the ensuing years, like, I've settled down. It sort of keeps me afloat, basically. I've written books, I've worked for Microsoft, I've run my own company building websites. I've done a whole bunch of things to sort of supplement that, but for the most part, that is my reality. So there, I don't know what I'm going to say now. What am I going to say? I think also through some various investments, when I sold our house in New Jersey, we made a little money on that. We also had a rental property, which I ultimately sold, and I, made some money on that as well. So there were sort of other sources of income coming in as well. But it's been a very big learning curve, from when I started to now, just to understand and ride the stock market. There was a period in 2007. I guess it was just before things crashed, and my investments were with one company, and I guess they were changing the name of the company, and so they kind of zeroed out that account, but then they put all the money into this other account with the new name. And so, but they weren't very good about explaining what had happened. And so one Friday night or Saturday morning, I got this statement that just said 0000. And I thought, oh my God, like, all my money is gone. What do I do? And I kind of knew in the back of my head, like, there was some logical explanation, like my money wasn't gone. My financial investor wasn't, drinking Cristal on a beach in Argentina or something, It was just like, there was a logical explanation. But that whole weekend, I went through this process, and I thought, I don't want my money all tied up in, this, just like, this nether region where I can't sort of see it or access it, or even enjoy it. And so that was when I decided to buy a house on Vashon Island, which is just near Seattle. And I ultimately sold that house just before I bought the chateau. So, it all just kind of rolls into another house. But I really felt that, at least with property, it feels a little more tangible. And so I felt like with property, I can enjoy the money, and I can share the property with other people. And that feels like fulfilling to me in terms of sharing the wealth I guess, sharing the sharing the guilt of this sort of blood money that I have. All right, I hope that makes sense and doesn't sound too entitled. That's not how I want to come across in all of this, but I'm just trying to be super honest about what it was like.